since then that a man with a tash has made so many women swoon.
Back in the late 70s, one TV show and its title character would drag the typical TV detective kicking and screaming into a very different world.
Eddie Shoestring was a very modern character. He was a breath of fresh air. He was a private eye, or a private ear, because of course he worked as a private eye for a radio station. He bucked the trend of things like Target and the Sweeney, because these were testosterone-charged police dramas, whereas this was a more laid-back, quirky type of character, and the programme was slightly lighter in tone and more modern, I think, coming into the 80s.
Previously, crime dramas on TV, they were either sort of manned by stalwart types or by bastards, pretty much, like in the Sweeney. And sort of Eddie Shoestring sort of comes in the middle of that, and he's got psychological problems. He's a bit of a geek, and you really hadn't seen a type like him before, battling crime. He wasn't a sort of a role model. He obviously can't dress himself, and it's hard to imagine him sort of living in the same universe, even as like Bodie and Doyle.
So who was this slightly shop-soiled private eye who would be a breath of fresh air in the lineup of the usual suspects of Sunday night drama? And what was it about him that would mark Shoestring out as something new and very different from the punch first, ask questions later brigade? Well, it all started with one man receiving a very unusual offer.
I was invited to go and join the BBC to overhaul Target. So I arrived, and about a week after I was there, the head of series, Graham MacDonald, came into my office and said, "Why don't we scrap it and do something new?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Have you got anything you'd like to do? I mean, try getting an offer like that today." So I don't know, somehow I found myself saying, why is it that the BBC never make a really good private eye series like Americans do, like Rockford? I said, why don't we really try and make it a private eye series? And Graham MacDonald said, "You're on."
Given his almost 20-year career in television as both writer and producer, this opportunity was something Robert Banks-Stewart knew didn't come around every day. But having got the offer, did he actually have an idea for this private eye show?
Of course, I hadn't the faintest idea what I was going to do. I suggested a private eye series, but being a writer, I suppose, I went home and I spent a week, deliberating and so forth. And then I heard something on radio. It was an advice program. I think it was how to overhaul your car or something. And I thought, hang on, maybe it's a radio station that has its own private eye, a private eye so-called, but he would have his own program. He would go out and solve people's problems.
Sounded like a good idea, if a little vague. But if it was going to go any further, Banks-Stewart was going to have to impress those higher up the BBC food chain, including future Director General Alistair Milne.
I said, supposing, Alistair, you were running a small commercial radio station. And he looked at me and thought, what's this guy saying, And I said, supposing you were, and you just rip a page out of the other pages where you have private eyes advertising, and then you get a guy in and you say, you've got a job with this radio station. And that was it. They said, great, go ahead. And I walked down the corridor with Graham MacDonald afterwards, and I said, God, blimey, I'm like a guy who sold 800,000 brushes. And Graham said, yeah, you better find them.
To help him in his quest, Banks-Stewart turned to friend and fellow writer Richard Harris. Together they fleshed out the concept, with Banks-Stewart giving Shoestring its name and Harris writing the first episode. But the Beeb didn't like Harris's script and he moved on. Banks-Stewart rewrote what would become Episode 1, Private Ear. His next task was finding other writers who could follow his lead in bringing Shoestring to life. One of those he turned to was a man who had penned scripts for Doctor Who and the very same target that Shoestring was looking to replace.
He said, well, would you like to write one? I said, of course I would. So I thought, at last, I got some work. And The first one was, well, it was the second episode, episode 2, Knock for Knock.
A friend of mine found this photograph of you.
I wondered if I'd stay in the church then, after what I saw in the trenches.
The point is, Mr. Appleby...
Chaps, there's one now.
I mean, I didn't want people who wrote the sort of blood and thunder, thriller, tearaway cars shrieking around corners, that sort of thing. I wanted character and human stories.
Mr. Appleby, about this photograph.
You want Alice?
Alice?
Yeah. Died in the Silver Jubilee year.
After that, he asked me if I'd like to become a script editor, which was perfect for me because it was a stepping stone on the way I wanted to go, the direction I wanted to go.
While Shoestring was taking giant strides, there were still 2 vital pieces missing from the jigsaw. The first was the fact that the BBC weren't yet seeing the show as a Sunday night drama, and the second?
Who was going to play him? Quite a lot of big names were in the hat, but I had seen Trevor in a play made by Granada, and I was terribly impressed by him, and I thought, hey, this is a clever guy. And a year later was when I was starting Shoestring. And so I said, I want a guy called Trevor Eve. And they said, who? And I said, well, he's a very fine actor, and I really believe that it'll work with him.
I heard that they were going to do this series, and I was called in to meet Robert Banks Stewart. I didn't want to do a series, you know. I thought, you know, that's the last thing I wanted to do. I was doing movies and theater, and I thought, what is this, you know? And I don't know. I met Bob, and he's as you've met him, and he was so enthusiastic about it, and it just sounded like a very original concept. So I decided to do it.
You on radio?
Yes. Well, don't look on it as losing a lodger. Look on it as gaining a public service. And I'm retained as of now.
But as what?
2727. Yes, our very own private eye. Shoestring's the name. That's right, Eddie Shoestring. And if you have the kind of problem you think is a job for investigation, why don't you ring us? We'll take your call in the strictest confidence and pass it on to our private ear on Radio West 329 meters. So why don't you ring us on 27272 and ask for Shoestring?
He just came along with so much energy and vitality, and it was very refreshing, actually.
Didn't you see who it was?
During the course of my inquiries, I just happened to be breaking and entering when somebody beat me up. And the hut caught fire. So if I don't get done for housebreaking, I most probably will for arson.
It seemed to be an opportunity to play somebody kind of eccentric, and there'd always been the sort of 70s tradition of really kind of, you know, straight-looking guys doing it right on the nose and everything. And this was a sort of character who was coming from left field. He'd had a problem, you know, in his sort of workplace, and had wandered off, and he was just an eccentric individual. And I thought it was a chance to just create somebody right from, you know, scratch.
Haven't seen that shirt before.
It's a pajama jacket.
You poor man.
No, not at all. I think it's quite interesting as a shirt, don't you?
He just warmed to it straight away and knew what it was. He knew it for what it was and how he could exploit it. And he was brilliant.
I had this very clear idea that if this character lived on a boat, you know, you wouldn't be hanging up his suit, because you always get your suit immaculately pressed from the costume department. So I went and got all these crumpled linens and insisted that they weren't hung up, and I didn't think he'd have a tie around his neck, you know. And I remember the first day of filming, and Robert probably, I think, will laugh when he sees this, but we were filming in a field, and I had my tie. I had this sort of thin tie, and they hadn't really checked me out. But anyway, he'd obviously got word that I was looking kind of crumpled and a bit... And he ran across the field saying, "Stop shooting, stop!" Don't do anything. And he had a chocolate velvet kipper tie in his hand and said, "You'll put this on." And I said, "Why?" He said, "You'll put it on and you'll do it up and you'll start." And he was so anti this sort of tie thing down here. So we had this enormous row in the middle of a field on the second day of filming Shoestring, and I say it not with necessarily pride, but I won out.
Robert Banks Stewart wouldn't be the only one to feel the force of Trevor's dedication to the role, as future Bond director Martin Campbell found out when he took the helm for one episode.
Trevor liked to know exactly what he was doing. He was very hands-on. I mean, in a good sense, you know, about his character, about what was happening, why he was doing stuff, and the way you blocked a scene, and you could discuss it with him.
Down. I might just clear those rocks.
Could be a little bit high maintenance sometimes, but it was all because he wanted it to be very good. I mean, it was all about the quality of the show.
Got a killer as well, were you?
That show rested very heavily on his shoulders, and I think probably the success of the show.
You've pushed me so far.
Things are successful if they've got passion in them. And Trevor's a very passionate actor and a passionate man.
Sit down. Get out of my way.
Sit down! Immediately, you were struck by how charismatic Trevor was. I think he had, you know, star quality stamped all over him, really.
With the title role taken, Banks Stewart looked to cast the other regulars on the show. For Erica Bayliss, the barrister who was also Eddie's landlady and sometimes sharer of his bed, Banks Stewart asked Doran Godwin to aid his leading man through his first major TV role.
I think he wanted somebody who had some experience, and perhaps it wouldn't be too bad an idea to have a lady alongside who might sort of steady it down a little bit.
I want to celebrate.
Didn't work.
In looking for someone to play the boss of Radio West and the man who would vainly attempt to control Eddie's expenses spending, Banks Stewart took a very lateral route.
I sat thinking, if I was doing this series in America, what sort of guy would I have as the guy who runs the radio station? And for some reason or other, the name Mickey Rooney, it seems incongruous, but I thought Mickey Rooney, a sort of not what you'd expect as the guy running a radio station. And the moment I thought of that, for some other reason, I thought of Michael Medwin.
Would you mind telling me what this case is all about?
Well, it's as intriguing as the Maltese Falcon.
And as expensive as Ben-Hur.
I said to my agent, how is it that Robert Banks Stewart decided to use me in this television series, Julian? And Julian said, my very good agent, he said, Michael, it's as big a mystery to me as it is to you.
You feel comfortable, do you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I know, because your job is to do what's best for the radio station.
One day you'll learn, Eddie. Keep off the rocks.
But Michael, in real life, you see, was a partner of Albert Finney's in Memorial Films, and he was actually a very astute and smooth businessman, and that's what I wanted on the screen with Don Satchley.
And for the final shoestring regular, Sonia, the ever-dependable Radio West receptionist, Liz Crowther was taken on, striking her own personal blow against casting cliches.
I blazed a trail for plumper actresses, because although I'd been asked to lose weight at the beginning, I was quite round, and before that, everybody seemed to be always terribly svelte and gorgeous, and I was a bit, you know, bit different.
Hello, Radio West.
So I was quite pleased about that in retrospect.
One of the other aspects of the show that helped it stand out from the crowd was its theme music.
So many people can remember the music. They can just hum it to you.
Yeah, the theme tune's actually kind of really good, and it's very hummable, and it's kind of quite funky, and it feels very up to date for, you know, the time. And it also kind of has a slightly sad, melancholic, almost slightly comedic quality as well in the harmonica, which kind of suits his character.
It was light, bright, laid back, carefree, pretty much, I think, like Shoestring's character. It seemed to reflect his qualities, and the opening sequences viewed around Bristol were interesting to us. We knew we were in for another good storyline every time you heard that music come up.
The program controller wanted me to set Shoestring in Slough. And I said, oh, no. In fact, I quoted that poem, "Come friendly bombs and rain on Slough." And I explained that really what I wanted was to set it in a place where I'd have a variation of locations. And I said Bristol would be ideal.
I think the Pit City was one of the characters in the story. I mean, there was Eddie and the sort of the radio station and Michael Medwin and everybody, but Bristol was the other character in it.
The whole atmosphere around Bristol is very different. It was an interesting environment. Perhaps a lot of people hadn't seen it before, so that added to the texture of the series.
With a strong cast, great locations and a dedicated team behind the camera, Shoestring seemed to have it all. But there was one thing it still didn't have, a place in the Sunday night schedule. Sunday night meant classic drama and TV watched by millions, and was exactly where Banks Stewart felt his show belonged. But BBC One controller Bill Cotton was having none of it, until a little bit of aristocratic intervention.
I had a girl called Jane Wellesley, former girlfriend of Prince Charles, daughter of the Duke of Wellington, no less, to be my PR. And she came to my office and watched an episode, this first episode. And I just, fiddled around in the outer office, and she came out and she said, "It's marvelous, I love it." And I said, "Well, Jane, I wish you could tell Bill Cotton." Now, Bill was entranced that he had Jane Wellesley on the staff. She walked into his office, this is a true story, she walked into his office and said, "Bill, you've got it all wrong. This is a Sunday night show. It will appeal to all ages. It's quality. You're mad to put this out." He changed his mind, put it out on a Sunday night, and well, you know what we did. We went to #1.
Shoestring certainly had Sunday night appeal, and I think a lot of it revolved around Shoestring. If you think of other Sunday night popular shows and really successful characters like Paul Dark and like James O'Needon, for example, they were very muscular characters. They were robust characters. They were unorthodox sometimes in their methods and in their lives. And Eddie Shoestring was all that and a bit more, with a very becoming moustache.
I'll never trust a man with a moustache.
On the 30th of September 1979, Shoestring made its debut to an audience of almost 20 million. Who'd have thought that a man with a moustache, recovering from a nervous breakdown, slouching his way around Bristol, investigating crimes and misdemeanours, all whilst having an on-off relationship with his landlady, would be regularly watched by almost half the population?
You're late.
Don't behave like a husband.
What do you mean? Who mended your vacuum cleaner?
Shop at the high street.
And blocked your sink?
Me, you blocked it up.
Put the shelves up in the kitchen?
What shelves?
There I see. I don't act remotely like your husband.
I know that he rented a room in her house, and I don't think he often had the money to pay for it. So I'm not quite sure how they arranged all that bit. But they had a sort of romance.
You know, Eddie, this new career of yours could be very awkward for both of us.
Why?
How am I to know if you're using me or not?
What do you mean?
What a healthy lust for my body is one thing. But trying to seduce me into getting information for you is something else.
She was very good for him because she was not bossy, but she was a very positive character. he also could get information from her because, don't forget, she wasn't just a barrister, but she was also a prosecutor. And therefore, she had access to files. And so Eddie was always sort of saying, could you find out who owns the, you know, and she'd say, Eddie, you know, it might cost me my job to do that. But she would come up with the goodies.
I asked you to look at those files as a favour. If that's the way you feel, then it's all right.
And you expect to have me too?
Mm. She was like the person that looked after me, wasn't she? A sort of, yeah, always, oh, Eddie, I can remember her saying.
Oh, Eddie. My own bed downstairs would have been a far better idea.
Never lose the frisson in your life. And forget what it was like in a bedsit.
I mean, this went out to sort of between 17 and 23 million people, which is unbelievable amount. And I can remember very clearly the day after the first episode went out that I walked down the street and it was completely different. People were waving to me and smiling and talking. And I just didn't know. I was not prepared. I was not prepared. And I can remember being in a major store in London where they announced that they were going to close the store so that I could sign autographs for the staff. I think I didn't go into a store for 2 years after that. I mean, I found it really freaky.
It wasn't only Trevor Eve who found the fame experience a bit bizarre. If Erica Bayliss was sharing more than her flat with Eddie, then that made her the envy of many a woman, as Doran Godwin found out on a train journey to Wales.
You just know that somebody knows who you are, and there was this sort of feeling, and she was staring at me, and she suddenly said, "Oh, you're Mrs. Shoestring, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And I thought, if I keep it very low-key, we're just, you know, just on a very crowded train. And she said, "Oh," she said, "I just love him, I love him." So I said, "Do you?" "Yeah." I mean, I knew immediately who she meant. And she said, "Yes," she said. "Sunday night's my husband's lucky night. He's in with a chance." I said, "Really, why?" And she said, "Oh, because we watch Shoestring," she said. And I thought, my God, Sunday night, her husband gets lucky because she's got excited watching Trevor on the telly.
What else are you besides a genius and a private eye?
I think a lot of young women fancied Trevor Eve as Eddie Shoestring. He had that sort of insouciance to him. He was the sort of guy that you would love to have had a date with, and you felt that you couldn't actually quite pin him down, but it might be worth the effort.
I remember my mum liking him, I remember my dad liking him, and there was something sort of quite childlike about him that made kids like him as well.
It seemed that everybody loved Eddie Shoestring. The show returned for a second series, big Sunday audiences and more critical acclaim.
I wondered where you had got to, Mr. Shoestring.
It had innovations. It had a new way of looking at a private eye. It had a new location. It had which sort of gave it a freshness, gave it a new feel. Had great actors. It had great music. And, you know, what more could you ask for?
A third series, perhaps? Well, not everyone wanted to come back for more.
I'm through. I resign.
Trevor announced, before we even finished, that he would not do a third series. And in those days, you didn't have an option. It wasn't known in television, at any rate, to take an option on the services of an actor or actress. So there wasn't any way we could actually say to him, please don't desert us, because, I mean, boy, if any series was ready for a third and possibly a fourth or even a fifth, it was that one.
I didn't want to go in and just play one part. You know, then I was, you know, 29 years of age. I just wanted to go off and do lots of other stuff, do theatre and, you know, see what was going on. That's what interests me. I didn't want you know, I didn't have children then or anything, so it was a very different climate, very different time.
And I took him up at my 80th birthday party and said, "Trevor, you put me on the cobbles after 21. We could have done a lot more. And he said, with hindsight, I wish we had. But it was a little late. I was 80, it was my birthday party, and we hadn't done any more.
Life can be a real bastard sometimes.
He called me up and said, yeah, you stupid bugger, what are you doing? We could have done this forever. And I'm sorry, Michael.
Ever wonder about the definition of success?
No. More money?
Is that what's troubling you already? A weekly paycheck not enough?
Don, do I have to do a weekly broadcast?
More work, that's the true meaning of success, Eddie.
I'm really glad about the decision that I made. I don't have any regrets at all. No, I don't.
There is a case to be made for Shoestring sort of ending at the right time after 2 series. I don't really subscribe to that. I do think we were robbed.
It was a bit of a blow to us to have to say goodbye to him, but I think they made the right decision in not putting anybody else into Trevor Eve's shoes for that. He had absolutely formed that character, nailed him. Our affinity and our loyalty was to him, and it was probably wise to leave it where they did.
Shoestring made its final bow on the 21st of December 1980, a Christmas-themed episode in which Eddie raced to round up faulty toys that threatened to spoil several children's festivities, and where he met another admirer.
Eddie Shoestring? Oh, this really has made my Christmas. I'm a great fan of yours, Eddie. My word, I am.
Oh, thanks very much. That's very kind of you, Santa.
We may have left him asleep on a sofa, but Eddie Shoestring's popularity and the show's cult status are still very much alive almost 30 years later.
He's followed me. You know, I can't get rid of him. Not that I want to. I'm perfectly happy for him to follow me, but he has followed me.
I think there's such a fondness for that character and such a fondness for the way that Trevor Eve played him that's why when people talk about it today, they tend to smile.
I'm amazed at the number of people who still say to me, oh, I loved that series.
It is part of television history, and yes, I'm proud to have been involved in it.
I thought it was bloody good. Yes, it was innovative and imaginative, and it still stands up. There's some things, you know, some hilarious fashion items that you see now and again, but it's good television.
Just to be a script editor on that show, you know, and when you say, you know, I was on Shoestring, say, oh, really? Oh, God, Shoestring, yeah. You know, and you think, yeah, it was good. It was really good, you know. It was a tremendous time of my life, you know.
It's stayed the course, you know. People remember it, and that's great, and I'm proud of that.
Why is it that every time a man takes you out to lunch around here, you're the dessert? That's terrible. But you're the new girl, and you're not much, so you might as well enjoy it while it lasts.
Mad Men continues tonight at 10 on BBC4.